I think we could stand here. I want to take a moment to welcome everyone. Thank you for coming out this evening. This is our fourth and final event of our 2023 series of film and community discussions. Tonight we have we're live on Zoom. We have some numbers of members that will be people that will be here. They're live now. Thank you for joining us, for those of you on Zoom. And we have a very eventful, a lot of activities for this evening. And Kevin will be talking about everything that's taking place this evening in a moment. But I would just like to take a moment to read a couple of paragraphs to you about the sponsors. Woodstock Land Conservancy is a nonprofit organization committed to the protection and preservation of open lands, forest, water resources, scenic areas, and historic sites in the Woodstock and the surrounding area. They are actually the main sponsor of this evening, and they're the ones responsible for putting on this event tonight. Woodstock Transition is part of a global transition town movement of communities working to reimagine and rebuild our world in response to the challenges of our time. Woodstock Transition has active groups, working groups, each engaged in locally to strengthen our community's resilience and to create positive alternatives. Woodstock Transition and Woodstock Land Conservancy have been putting on these events for 11 years now. This is our 11th year. And Woodstock Jewish Congregation is dedicated to the advancement of Jewish ethics, culture, religion, sustainability practices. The WLC strives to enable participants to enrich their lives and that of their communities through worship, celebration, study, and fellowship. Again, we want to thank the Woodstock Jewish Congregation for hosting us this evening. And Woodstock Woodstock Jewish Congregation has been involved here with us doing the series for the last 5 years. And so we want to thank them for that as well. So now I'd like to invite Kevin Smith to come up, and he will introduce the evening. But I do also want to say that Kevin is the brainchild behind this evening. He's been the inspiration for this evening, and he's brought the people who you will be seeing and listening to together, along with everything else that you'll witness. So I want to give you please give me a warm welcome for Kevin Smith. You have your own mic.
Hi, everybody, and hi, everybody that's participating by Zoom. Super stoked tonight to be here. First and foremost, we have a lot of people. I'm not going to be able to acknowledge all of the different people from various municipal boards, committees, nonprofits, community organizations, and government agencies. But they're the people that make this possible. One of the main themes for tonight is about possibility, and it's about partnership and what partnership can make possible. As Kirk said, we have a lot of challenges in our time. The inspiration for this event was born out of really thinking about those challenges and a conversation that I had with Jeff. And out of that came this notion to bring together these three great planners tonight. Before we get into the heart of the evening, I do want to ask our Deputy County Executive, Woodstock's own Amanda Laval, to come up. Amanda has a few words she would like to convey on behalf of County Executive Jen Metzger. Amanda?
Good evening, everyone. Just want to thank you for extending the invitation to the county executive. She's disappointed that she can't join you herself this evening, but had another commitment that couldn't be moved. And I think, as some of you know, she is truly not just a proponent of active transportation, but she really does, walk the walk. And that includes bike commutes to work, and also realizing the importance to trails, to community and community building, and also to reducing emissions from the transportation sector.
Right on.
And in February, she passed her first executive order after taking office in January. And it was very important for her for that order to be focused on the environment. And it has 13 points related to thinking about both the county's operations and goals community-wide when it comes to reducing emissions to meet the New York State Climate Act, which is a piece of legislation she worked very hard on in the New York State Senate, and also one of the most ambitious climate laws in the country. And I wanted to share a couple points that I thought you might find interesting from the executive order, or you can certainly read it for yourself online, but that one of the orders is to create diverse and inclusive opportunities in the green economy that address the legacy of pollution that's burdened communities of color and low-income communities in particular. She's also pledging to further the installation of electric vehicle charging on county buildings and working with municipalities countywide on doing the same. And the county has had public EV charging since 2015, and I just looked at the numbers the other day, and it's over 22,000 public charging sessions in that time. So something that starts off in your community as maybe one or two of something like a charging station, it can grow, and it can really support the deployment of these lower carbon transportation options over time. And finally, also, I wanted to just mention that we'll be developing a public engagement and outreach plan to help businesses and residents target, and especially target, low and moderate income households and communities of color in how to reduce both transportation emissions and also building emissions. And that was very important to her, and she created a chief diversity officer position in the county executive staff to really look countywide on many issues, but also to make sure that we're always looking at our executive order and also our climate action agenda through a lens of equity. So reducing transportation emissions, we are also looking for ways to do additional studies to look at how to make transit more effective in Ulster County, and doing so in a way that it serves more people in a more effective fashion. So I can't think of a more critical time to have a discussion that links together communities and e-mobility and active transportation, all the different levels of community partners here, along with nonprofit and regional organizations, and just the community of people and pieces that are here together to work together. And I want to thank our county font of information for participating, Dennis Doyle, in the panel, because so much of the work over the years from the county has come from the planning department, and Dennis has played a very important role in that over the years. So thank you all so much, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
So much. Oh, thank you, Kirk. Just to put in a little plug, Amanda is one of the recipients of our William Ginsburg Award at the Vernal Fling that the Land Conservancy puts on in May, along with Billy Dinter, the owner of Overlook Bikes. So I just thought I would get that plug in while we're at it. We hope everybody will attend and support. I'm going to say one thing. When I called Jeff to have a conversation with him, I was a little bit in despair about the scope of the challenges we're facing with climate change. And he commiserated with me and he said, yeah, I know exactly what you mean. We're not doing enough and we're not doing it enough fast enough. And he said, but maybe we should look at it a different way also. And I said, how's that? And he said, just look back 10 years and the things that have happened that we hadn't even thought about 10 years ago. And I said, okay, try me. And he said, CitiBike. He said, CitiBike was just coming online. And now, if it were a standalone transit agency, it would be the 25th largest transit agency in the country. And I said, okay, what else? And he said, Empire State Trail. 750-mile statewide trail, traversing the state north-south and east-west, accomplished in 3 years. And nobody was even, well, maybe Bob Anderberg was dreaming about it in 2013, but it was not a plan. It was not something that had been proposed. And yet, between 2018 and 2020, the first version of that trail was planned, developed, constructed, and opened to the public just in time for the pandemic. So with that, that's all I will say, except I'm just so appreciative of having these three gentlemen representing the agencies and the organizations that they do. Partnership is the name of the game for Woodstock Land Conservancy. You know, when you're a small fish in a big pond, you got to make partners. and that's how we get things accomplished. And we're really proud to have accomplished some really big things with Ulster County and on projects that Jeff, when he was consulting with Alta Planning, developed the initial plans for. And with Peter, who has helped realize these incredible landscape projects for Open Space Institute on behalf of all of us. Things that Frederick Law Olmsted would have looked at and said, yes, this is exactly what should be happening with our landscapes here in Ulster County. So I'm gonna just do a couple of capsule bios here of these three gents. And then I'm going to, we're gonna lead this into the first video. We're playing a little bit of jazz here. We've got like several video shorts interspersed with presentations by Peter, followed by Dennis, and then Jeff will bring us home. And then we want to leave time for Q&A. So Peter Karis is a New York State registered landscape architect, currently oversees the growing Parks and Stewardship program at Open Space Institute. He has over 25 years experience in design, engineering, and project management. He has built or transformed over 100 miles of shared use trails in some of the most scenic locations in the Hudson Valley, most notably with the River to Ridge Trail, the historic carriage roads at Minnewaska State Park Preserve, and the newly upgraded Wallkill Valley Rail Trail south in Ulster County, just completed. Annie Berglund of OSI was instrumental in helping bring that project home. That is a improvement, refurbishment of the Wallkill Valley Rail Trail from Sojourner Truth Park in New Paltz to Main Street Gardner. And it is open and it is gorgeous. Peter is also leading OSI's recently announced Growing Greenways West of Hudson Greenway Trails initiative that envisions a 250-mile network of greenway trails connecting the Empire State Trail to dozens of communities in Ulster, Sullivan, and Orange counties. Dennis Doyle. Dennis has served as planning director since 2004. He brings over 40 years of experience and expertise in the planning process and associated regulatory, environmental, policy, strategic plan development, as well as technical knowledge in the environmental sciences, site design, and demographic. You know, I can't read this, Dennis. Dennis is the institutional memory of Ulster County when it comes to planning. He is a font of information, he is a strategic thinker, and he's a cross-disciplinary thinker. Planning's not easy, and it's very easy for each of us, you know, Kevin with his Trails and Greenway hat on, to think that the perspective I have is the only one that really matters or should matter. And Dennis has this incredible ability to couple housing with transportation, with recreational trails throughout the sectors, with economic development. And it's a very, very rare skill set. And we're extremely fortunate to have him. Evening meetings for county officials are almost every night of the week. Yeah, so thank you, Dennis, for being here. Jeff Olson is an American urban architect who dedicated his career to alternative transportation and became a founder of the largest bike share system in North America, New York CitiBike. He is a former principal of Alta Planning, including serving as lead consultant to New York State in the planning construction of the Empire State Trail. Earlier in his career, much earlier, he served as New York State DOT's first statewide bicycle pedestrian program manager. And he subsequently served at the federal level as the director of the White House Millennial Trails Initiative, a national program to honor the past and imagine the future with more than 1,000 trail projects across the United States as part of the national celebration of the year 2000. While with Alta, Jeff was consultant to Ulster County, working with Director Doyle on the first non-motorized transportation plan, as well as the Ulster Delaware Rail plus Trail feasibility study and the conceptual plan for the Kingston Green Line. Jeff has a wealth of experience working right here in our county. He loves it. He loves to come here and ride his bike, and we're lucky to have him as well. So with that, I would wonder if I could get Jeff to set up our first video.
I won't go too far ahead and we'll keep this simple, but if you're going to go somewhere in the world and look at the best of what's happened for alternative transportation, active mobility, whatever term you want to use, you have to go to the Netherlands, right? And really, that's all we need to say right now. I hope you enjoyed this clip, and I want you to think particularly about the purpose of this was to show people that what was once thought was impossible is very much possible.
Tracks. But how did they get their cycling infrastructure? Why and when? The very first Dutch cycle path was opened in 1885 in Utrecht, but it was really a racetrack for competition on high-wheelers, men like this. There's no real connection to the present-day cycling infrastructure. Cycling had long been for the elite in the Netherlands. It was only after the safety bicycle was invented and became affordable for the masses that cycling really took off, from about the 1920s. Many of these bicycles were Dutch-made. By then, most cities had several bicycle manufacturers. Bicycles became so affordable that even children began to cycle. But the streets in the cities were not redesigned. There was no need for it at that time. That was different in the countryside. Because of the higher speeds of motor traffic there, it had been standard practice to have cycleways next to highways since the early 1930s, some of which still exist. After World War II, the bicycle was the most affordable and most used means of transportation. It would take until the 1960s before cars came into reach of most of the population. And when they did, they changed everything. Planners thought they had to redesign all public spaces to make way for the car. Bicycles were seen as old-fashioned, things of the past that would vanish soon enough. They didn't, and cars required more space than there was available. Towns and cities were not made to accommodate all that traffic, and there was another high price to pay. With cars taking over the public realm, the streets became very dangerous. By 1972, the worst year in history for traffic deaths, 9 people were killed every day in traffic in the Netherlands. People started protesting against tearing down buildings for roads in the city. In Amsterdam, the road plans were stopped in a very tight vote in the city council. Utrecht did build a road, partly, but because it was never finished, it didn't serve a real purpose. To make traffic safer, speed limits were introduced, as were drink driving laws and seat belts. People at the time did not think it was necessary, but the figures proved otherwise. The death toll dropped considerably, but not really for cycling. All over the country, people joined forces to demand better cycling policies. A journalist, who lost one of his 3 children in traffic while another was injured, got a group of parents together. Their slogan, "Stop the Child Murder," was bold, but it resonated, not only in society, but also with decision makers, especially those who had been affected themselves. The Minister of Transport had lost a son in traffic. He was willing to experiment to improve cycling safety. In the late 1970s, the first cycle routes were tried out in Tilburg and The Hague, a mid-sized town and a large city. While criticized for being too elaborate, too expensive, and too disruptive, they did start a change. A third project in Delft proved that one route in a city is not enough. You need a cycling network. Smaller interventions, like allowing two-way cycling in a one-way street, bus stop bypasses, shortcuts through a park, small bridges and traffic lights adjusted for cycling, were more cost-effective to improve cycling levels and cycling safety. Further experiments changed Dutch street design. Speed bumps slowed down cars. Home zones, called woonerf in Dutch, became places where cars had to share the road with people, even children playing. City centers were closed to car traffic and thrived. Not everything worked right away. The first cycle street was too far ahead of its time. Drivers weren't willing to give up their privileges just yet. Zones with a speed limit of 30 km per hour were effective, at least if you didn't just put up a sign, but really changed the street to reflect that lower speed. Slowly, the Netherlands developed a system of different types of infrastructure for different locations and functions. There are roads for moving traffic, there is place to live your lives, and there are roads connecting the two, each with their own type of infrastructure, optimized for their function. After redesigning almost every single street in the last 30 years, it is now often instantly clear what a space is for. Fun fact, the type of cycling infrastructure that was considered too fancy in the experiments in Tilburg and The Hague has now become standard all over the country. Cycling has become a viable alternative to the car, especially when combined with the train for longer distances. Bicycle parking at Dutch train stations is spectacular. But the developments don't stop. Separating cycling from motor traffic now happens on route level. While through motor traffic goes around residential areas, the cycle routes go right through them. And some streets that were once main car routes have evolved. A cycleway got the cycling volumes up to the point that it became too narrow. Now the entire street has become a cycling street where cars are guessed. At places where there is more cycling than motor traffic, cycle tracks are beginning to be removed. Thanks to fewer car movements, that is possible. On average, the Netherlands does not own fewer cars than people in the neighboring countries, but the Dutch do use them for different journeys and on different locations. Wherever possible, the more car-centric past is erased, so that the Dutch can cycle on, and cities can look and feel even better in the future. Creating cycle tracks is not a goal. Creating an attractive and safe living space is.
Am I on? Yeah. Pretty cool, right?
Is that what we're getting?
Yes, possibly. Yeah. It may take us 50 years too. Yeah, probably will, but maybe sooner. Yeah, we've already made a good start in a lot of ways. And to that end, I would like to introduce our next presenter, Peter Karis. And Peter is going to share with us a little bit about OSI's strategic initiatives. Oh, we're gonna run the video first. Excuse me. We're gonna start with this video, Hero of the Hudson Valley. Thank you. Sorry about that.
The story of OSI, like many land trusts, starts in a place. Over the past 50 years, OSI has conserved 250,000 acres in New York State, a third of that, over 80,000 acres in the Hudson Valley. What we want to do is ensure that a place like Sterling Forest or Scunnamunk or Fonstuck or Minnewaska is more than just a green sort of spot on a map. It is a place that people come to, use, and love.
Groups like Open Space Institute make sure that public spaces in the Hudson Valley have public access and knit together protected lands into a much larger landscape of protected places.
In large part, the impact of OSI in the Hudson Valley is because of Bob Anderberg and the fact that he has committed his life, he's committed his soul, he's committed his being to conserve this landscape. Conservation requires at least 3 things: patience, persistence, and perseverance. And Bob embodies all 3.
At age 15, I came here on a rock climbing trip. It was a beautiful April day with crystal clear skies. And I looked up and I saw these gleaming white cliffs, and it was transformative. I always thought that the setting aside of land was one of the most selfless acts a person could do. I thought it was a noble pursuit, and I wanted to be part of it. And it became my life's work.
There's really been a cultural shift in the purpose of land conservation. You know, in the old days, if it's wilderness, you bought it and left it alone, right? You sort of locked it up. What we are trying to do now is unlock open space. And we've been unlocking open space in a number of ways. Emblematic to that is River to Ridge. It is on the border of New Paltz, and it takes people up to the Shawangunk Ridge. We spent about $6 million creating a wonderful trail, and at the height of COVID, we saw 250,000 people or so using it in every imaginable way.
Building vast assemblages like this, it takes patience, it takes capital, it takes a willingness to assume risk. This transaction was the confluence of great land conservation and working with great conservationists in terms of the board of the Open Space Institute and the Smiley family.
OSI has invested millions of dollars in restoration of carriage roads, trailways, and more land acquisition that is bringing more people, more diverse people to landscapes that can accommodate them, but also will benefit them.
When I think about groups like Open Space Institute, they act as a convener, as a partner to so many of the local land trusts who are here.
OSI, working with the Wallkill Valley Land Trust, acquired the Rosendale Trestle, turning it into a truly premier pedestrian walkway serving Ulster County.
I'm really excited to think about what the future brings, thanks to the work that OSI has done over the last many decades, but also I think about where we're going and think about the leadership that they bring to this community.
I'm really looking forward to the next 5 to 10 years because I think there'll be some really interesting conservation, which I think will benefit the increased demand, increased population, and indeed the climate resilience that we need as we think about our futures.
You know, so often when we talk about legacy, the conversation turns to the number of acres, the number of dollars, and how many deals you've done. I almost view it differently. For me to understand OSI's legacy, I get out of bed on a Saturday morning and I go out. And I see people wandering the River to Ridge Preserve, you know, marveling at the views of Mohawk and the Shawangunk Ridge. The Hudson River Valley and New York State is replete with places that, but for OSI, would have been developed. They would not have been open to the general public. And it's been a real joy to see places come into the public domain and become such a part of the fabric of the people who live here.
Ladies and gentlemen, Bob Anderberg. Annie Berglund, and Mr. Peter Karis.
Hi, everyone. I'm Peter Karis with OSI, and I have some notes, so I hope you don't think I'm reading, but I might be reading a little bit. Many thanks to the Woodstock Land Conservancy, Woodstock Transition, and the Woodstock Jewish Congregation for organizing, hosting this wonderful event. As Kevin said earlier, it is about partnerships. I'm delighted to be here to share my experience with Greenway Trails and to tell you all about the important work that OSI is pursuing on this topic. Quickly on Kevin, whenever I want to feel good about myself, I call Kevin because he's so positive and knowledgeable about the trails. We geek out all the time. So thank you, Kevin, for inviting me tonight. And also the Woodstock Land Conservancy, Catskill Mountain Keeper, hi Kathy, Walcavai Land Trust, the Trail Conference, and so many other regional and local community groups that we work with throughout the Hudson Valley, Ulster County, the local towns. We're grateful for the partnerships and hope that the work that we bring adds value to this collective conservation work. As the short film highlighted, we've been working at this for a long time. It's through this lens that we see the face and nature of conservation in the Hudson Valley changing. An increasingly central ingredient to our work, especially post-COVID, is connectivity. Connection to land, connection to a place, connection to each other. And it's this connectivity manifested in these trails that we think we've found a whole that's greater than the sum of its parts. In January, OSI unveiled a long-term plan to develop a multi-use trail network connecting the Western Hudson Valley's vast network of scenic trails, diverse communities, and renowned open spaces. Affectionately, we call this Growing Greenways. And the Growing Greenways plans expands on decades of our work protecting land and providing access to open space in partnership with the regional local communities, and it presents a vision to enhance and connect more than 250 miles of the region's historic railroad, canal, and carriage road corridors into one publicly accessible system for both residents and visitors. In the aggregate, we envision connecting dozens of communities in Ulster, Sullivan, and Orange counties. Next slide, please. The plan outlines the long-term opportunities and benefits creating these new community linkages, including promoting physical activity and public health, expanding non-motorized transportation options, boosting economic activity and tourism, and advancing a more welcoming and equitable access to the outdoors. We call this open spaces for all of which collectively aid in fostering a stronger sense of place and community. Next slide. Right now, we're working hard across this proposed trail network on many levels, including funding through public-private partnerships, direct land acquisition, and the design, engineering, and physical construction of some of these trail segments. And let me walk you through a few highlights. As Kevin mentioned, we're really happy to complete the latest section of the Walcavai Rail Trail from New Paltz to Gardner. And this is a final piece of work since 2019, restoring the entirety of the Walcavai Rail Trail from Kingston to Gardner. And we're actively planning more. We're pushing down to Wallkill with active funding requests to some of our federal representatives. Later in May, we're going to begin an 18-month-long engineering study and a framework for design plan for the 57-mile O&W D&H Canal Corridor from Kingston to Port Jervis. Huge, huge project. This summer, we're going to begin capital improvements on the O&W in Ulster County. First section from Accord to Kerhonkson in the town of Rochester, and starting in Ellenville, about 2 miles north to the Eastern Correctional Facility. This and the Wallkill project that I mentioned earlier were all funded by Ulster County using federal ARPA dollars with a grant to OSI. So this is the funding in action. We're also working very diligently south in Orange County, another great partner. We're about to transfer 10 miles of a new emerging rail trail, the Scunnamunk Rail Trail, which starts in Chester and will eventually go northeast, connecting to Cornwall, Hudson, and New City and Newburgh. So the transfer of the first 10 miles is going to go to Orange County. They have plans to actually acquire and build this first 10 miles by 2025. So a lot of action in Orange County. And this has actually spun off a very interesting project in that at the confluence of the New Scunnamunk Trail and the Orange Heritage Trail is a property, county-owned property called Camp LaGuardia. We're partnering with the county to develop a master plan for a new county park that'll serve as a hub for this emerging Greenway Trails network. Next slide. And just to make it all very real, I'll leave you with our most recent, most tangible result. This is the new Plattekill Creek Bridge on the Wallkill Valley Rail Trail, about 1 mile south of Sojourner Truth Park. It is probably one of the best views of the Shawangunk Ridge around. And Annie and I completed a brand new bridge there just a few months ago, and it's already being well used by the public. So real tangible results. Thank you all.
So now I'd like to bring up Director Dennis Doyle, and Dennis is going to help us look back a little bit. We're going to look back 15 years at Ulster County's first non-motorized transportation plan. And what in that plan were a lot of blue sky aspirational goals that probably a lot of people thought this plan would get completed and it would go on a shelf with so many other plans and it would sit there untouched. This goes to, Jeff's comment to me about all the things that we couldn't imagine 15 years ago that have actually come to pass. So here to give us a little historical context, Director Doyle.
Thanks, Ken. So thank you. And it's always interesting to be called the institutional memory of a county. I have some compassion for the county if I'm the institutional memory, so we appreciate that. I just want to say something before we get into the actual plan itself. I just want to say that the reason that people are successful, that things are successful, is because of the people's passion. Because people stand up, whether it's a loss of the loved one, whether it's a desire to get from point A to point B, whether it's an understanding that your community is suffering because they can't reach food, those passions drive policy. And policy drives plans, and plans drive projects. So what ends up happening is if you look at this, if you look at the partnership between the county and OSI, whether it's Williams Lake Hotel, whether it's the proposal in Ellenville, or whether it's working with respect to ARPA funds to get money for the Wallkill Valley Rail Trail and for trails on the ONW, all of those come about because we've worked together and we understand what we're trying to do together. And we can work together in terms of making sure that we have a vision that is now part of a plan that then becomes the legislature's ability to understand what we're trying to do and how it fits into a whole. In addition to being the director of planning, I'm also the director of something called the Ulster County Transportation Council. The Ulster County Transportation Council programs federal money. And so when you start to look at some of the projects that we're doing, those projects essentially came about because of the fact that in 2003, we became a transportation council and we programmed somewhere in the neighborhood of about $367 million for transportation work countywide, both with respect to local projects as well as New York State Department of Transportation projects. I want to go back and talk about a little bit about where passions are going and where policy is going today before I get into the plan itself. One of the things I think you're seeing is the reason you're so successful is because people like John Grossboll and Kevin Smith showed up at public meetings and said, we really need to do something about this. We really need to move these things forward. And that enabled us to essentially have a different conversation with our legislative counterparts in order to move funding forward. The other thing that ends up happening is that there's a gradual understanding that the auto-centric world that we live in needs to change. Whether it is looking at pedestrian zones in areas where we have activity centers such as New Paltz or Kingston or some of the other areas in the county, or whether it's talking about connecting trails themselves, whether it be the Ashokan Rail Trail or the Hudson Valley Rail Trail in its various phases. We've been engaged in trail production right now since 2008, 2009, when the non-motorized transportation plan was done. And if you remember that map that was up that basically showed the transportation corridors, all corridors do lead to Kingston. It's one of the reasons it basically came to be the county seat, and it was one of the reasons that it's the only city in the county. From a geography standpoint, if you look at the Shangum Mountains and the Catskills, and then the Walk Hill Valley, all of those essentially funnel your transportation system into the Kingston area. We've taken advantage of that in terms of the acquisition of rail facilities. In 1968, the county acquired the O&W Railroad. We actually acquired it for transportation purposes. We were thinking about at the time, I want you to think about some of the work that has done that basically we're trying to avoid major population centers. The idea was essentially to actually relocate Route 209 around Ellenville and around Stone Ridge and move that area off into that. We also, in that acquisition, we also had a conversation with respect to its use for trail facilities. That conversation became much more important as we move forward, and we had to deal with those individuals that essentially wanted to sell those adjoining lands to the adjoining landowners because of liability concerns and privacy concerns. And we had to fight those battles on a repeated basis. And finally, what we did, instead of having a regional trail that essentially was owned by the county, the decision was made to actually move that ownership back to the municipal level. And one of the reasons that was done was we could actually use the value of that property to meet the match so that we could get recreational funds from the state so that we could build that trail. And that was one of the first starts at O&W. We've worked through other issues. We're currently trying to finish up a Midtown linear park. It actually runs from the area of Cornell Street. It runs through some of the lower income neighborhoods in the city of Kingston, and it connects into the Kingston Plaza. It was originally envisioned not only as an active transportation system, but also the means for that neighborhood to essentially be able to access food from their neighborhood without moving into the areas on the roads itself. We've done studies that essentially looked at work on the traffic circles and modern roundabouts. As part of that modern roundabout that you now see at the end of 587, we worked with a consultant out of Florida. And one of the things that he said to us was that he'd really like an opportunity to take a look at the Broadway corridor. And so we started work on the Broadway corridor, thinking that we were literally talking about shoulders on either side of Broadway as part of a road diet process to essentially bring the corridor down. And then listening. One of the things that you have to do as a planner is listening, and then listening to the individuals and bicyclists and others that were involved. The decision was made to go with a two-way cycle track. It's a little bit, I think, innovative for Kingston. We're not seeing the use that we would like to see, but I think that use will come. And that cycle track, not only did it improve bicycle conditions in the corridor, it actually, because of the synchronization of the signals, it actually reduced the travel time through the corridor and reduced greenhouse gas emissions in the corridor itself. We're currently working on and just began construction on areas with respect to the Kingston Rail Trail. It runs from Washington Avenue and connects out to the O&W on 209. That construction should be completed by the end of the year. We have working on a plan now for a connection in Highmount. It's going to run from Highmount to the Bel Air Day use area along the U&D corridor. That corridor, essentially, that work it's about 5 miles. That work should be completed, I would think, by 2024, end of 2025, depending upon how that work goes. We have seen an amazing ability for the legislature to begin to invest not only in trail systems, but also to invest in improvements to its own infrastructure. Kathy Nolan led a charge to essentially develop a complete streets policy for Ulster County. Thank you, Kathy, for that. That policy is now in effect, and you're seeing some of that work done, that when we redo roads, we put shoulders on those roads. New bridges that are built in the county now have shoulders and or sidewalks on them as well. The best example of that is the new bridge in the town of New Paltz, on the edge of New Paltz across the Walk Hill. That has a shoulder and sidewalk on it. The other thing that begins to happen when we look at the county, I'm going to trip here. The other thing that begins to happen when we look at the county is trying to make the connection between Kingston and Saugerties. It's a very difficult connection to make. And when we looked at the plan calls for that as a heritage connection, to make that connection. We actively look at that, at how to do that, but we have not been successful. Moving away from some of those projects, I just want to talk a little bit, and how much time do I have left? Oh, I just want to talk a little bit. Usually when a planner talks, they usually start waving things in the background and telling me to stop. But one of the things I want to say is the county planning board has a responsibility to review land use actions in municipalities. And we have developed a set of policies with respect to those reviews that include connections to sidewalks. A lot of the local planning boards and individuals in the past would say we're building sidewalks to nowhere. Now we really don't have that problem at all. That we have a lot of traction with respect to those recommendations. So we get those things accomplished. And then the only thing I would say is keep your passion, keep talking to us, keep telling us there's things that we should be looking at or we're not looking at, and then let's make sure that in the next 10 years that we complete all of the things that are on those priority lists that are associated with the non-motorized transportation plan. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
That photograph is from 2018. I believe that was the last major legislative vote to approve the Ashokan Rail Trail. And that is our board president, Patty Goodwin, who's here tonight, thanking the legislature. We can't do this without the legislature. The legislature decides. Kathy Nolan, could you stand up for 1 second? Kathy has helped lead our rail trail committee, both outside government as a volunteer, has attended more meetings before, and then she actually stood for election and is now in her second tenure as county legislature. And she's such a great partner. I just can't thank you enough, Kathy. Yeah. So now we got a little change of pace here. Jeff, do you want to frame this? Okay.
By the way, if anybody knows John Stewart in any way and can get him a heartfelt thank you, he saved our company. The video you're about to see was an episode called Filled Pedal Racket, The Daily Show. Everything that could possibly have gone wrong up until this show aired had happened. And you're going to see, we get taken down that day in live video from the Wall Street Journal's own TV channel. We had more failures go on. I'll tell you a little more about the story later. We had been forced to delay the launch of CitiBike by about 6 months, and we were given a warehouse on the Brooklyn waterfront in the Navy Yard. You can only imagine what happened next. Of course, we got hit by Hurricane Sandy. We lost the entire system, $20 million in a single night, hit by 11.5 feet of seawater. We came back out of that and managed to launch the system 6 months later, only to find all kinds of problems that still remain, and we're getting attacked in the press. Dorothy Rabinowitz of the Wall Street Journal just throws us under the bus that day, and we think it's all over. And then John Stewart did this.
But of course, this being New York City, somebody's got to have a problem with it.
Bikers and drivers alike admit they're nervous with a sudden influx of novice riders on unfamiliar equipment.
Doesn't accept our credit card.
We want the bike share program, but we wanted less heavy-handed placement of these racks.
Oh, they're not safe. Doesn't work. It looks like blah, blah, blah. You know, we used to say the same thing about the Irish. And look at them now! They're running the joint! I was just wondering if there had ever been anybody who was like, look, I like the Irish, I just thought there'd be more judicious placement. Doesn't anybody have a real objection?
Do not ask me to enter the mind of the totalitarians running this government of the city. This means something much more than the specifics of this dreadful program. It means envision what happens when you get a government that is run by an autocratic mayor or other leader, and a government before which you are helpless.
Just bikes, lady. Slow down, Lady Hunger Games. Or should I say, Pulitzer Prize-winning editorial board member of the Wall Street Journal. Am I missing something here? What group are you suggesting is conspiring to crush the will of the people?
The bike lobby is an all-powerful enterprise.
Ah, yes, big wheel. And their union thugs! Go! Damn you, Fozzie Bear! So the good news, the Wall Street Journal is finally recognizing the corrosive effect of lobbying. The bad news, it's the bike lobby. Come on! There are real complaints to be made here, and to see if the people of New York are willing to make them, we sent Al Madrigal out to the streets to make the case.
With the CitiBike program now nearing the end of its first week, Dorothy Rabinowitzes all over the city are speaking out against this tyrannical bike share.
I think it's a disaster for the city.
I think it's a hazard.
I might be a potential accident. Somebody might ride out like this and hit me or hit someone else as a bike's coming out not looking.
But let's be honest, you're a potential accident no matter what you're doing.
And the damage is sure to take a far greater toll.
You have an historic neighborhood being desecrated by these ugly bikes. Can you imagine the property values going down on these 3 buildings in front of which?
I think that one went from like 22 million down to 21 million.
It's sad.
Heartbreaking even. Not to mention the bike share's biggest tragedy of all.
They're taking away from valuable parking spots.
At least 3-4 other cars could be here.
The bikes take up more room than the Hondas because they extend into the street. We're looking at the same thing, right? Yeah, we are looking at the same thing. So you must be for the bikes. No, I don't give a either way. Okay, well, neither do I because I don't live here.
The worst part is, Mayor Bloomberg covertly planted these bike stations with practically zero notice.
One morning I woke up, they were here.
How awful that Bloomberg has done this.
Apart from the 159 meetings, they didn't say a word.
Obviously, there was some community outreach, but they put these stations down without any due process. For example, on West 4th Street.
Okay, well, even though that's not true, why is it?
Well,
yes, everyone hates CitiBike, even the neighborhoods that don't have it, like Brooklyn's Bed-Stuy.
Where's CitiBike where we really need a CitiBike? Ain't no CitiBike in the hood.
So you're saying people in your neighborhood actually need the bike program?
We need the bikes.
Why can't you guys just take the subway?
Take the subway? The J train? The J train? Where the am I gonna go on the J train?
The bikes go out to Clinton Hill.
You know what? Motherfuckers in Clinton Hill own houses and afford cars. You know what we own here?
What?
Roach spray cans, Black Flag.
He just didn't see how these bikes could destroy his community.
They're an eyesore in the neighborhoods. It used to be a beautiful historic neighborhood.
An eyesore in the neighborhood? We in the hood. Them little pretty royal blue-ass bikes, if anything, they're gonna decorate this mother.
Certainly someone must have a solution.
If only Bloomberg could come up with an alternate form of transportation, something that was convenient for all the citizens to sort of check out on a regular basis. It's not like you could rent a horse.
The only thing I can think of is smaller cars.
Tiny cars.
Tiny cars. Maybe they're going to have electric cars.
Tiny electric cars.
Tiny electric cars, like the golf carts.
while the hood waits on those golf carts. They'll just have to make do.
Keep it up. Keep that bitch in the air. Keep that bitch in the air. Yeah. There you go. That's how you do a city bike.
How magical. We'll be right back.
So with that, I would like to bring up Mr. Jeff Olson.
I'm glad you've all had a laugh at my expense, right? Seriously, that was one of the most extraordinary moments, and in a career of extraordinary moments. First of all, though, I want to acknowledge a couple things. Paul Steely-White, who was part of all that. Thank you for being here, and especially with your new job. Family, my cousins, Donna and Harvey, please stand up. I got to have dinner right down the street. It doesn't get a whole lot better when you've married the rabbi's daughter than to do a public meeting in a temple with family down the street. I mean, that's just about as good as it's going to get for tonight. And thanks to all, Woodstock has become in many ways a second home for us. We get to spend a lot of time here together, and there are many of you here tonight that I've had the chance to meet. Ulster County has just been incredible, and I think one of the reasons, Kevin, back to that initial conversation about this evening, was that a lot has been accomplished in what may seem like it takes forever, and I'm the least patient person in the world, just ask my kids. But this plan, which has been literally hanging in my office since 2007, because I'm so proud of it, and our team was so proud of it. John Thomas, if you're watching this, you did the GIS work on that map. It became one of the things that I think, and there's nowhere in New York State that I would say implemented more from a master plan of this kind. It was really the first county to do a non-motorized transportation plan, so we were that far ahead of the curve. And I put it up there with projects that I've worked on over the course of my career in places like Jackson Hole, Wyoming, which has one of the most advanced pathway systems in North America. I've been very lucky to be able to work on this kind of stuff and work all over the world and have a place this close to home get this much done. We go from that map to the ones that you're just talking about a few minutes ago at OSI. Again, I have to thank you guys, because now I no longer have to trespass when I'm in New Paltz. I spent a lot, true story, spent a lot of time going through that gatehouse long before it was legal. So thank you for making sure I don't have to do that. My daughter was in school there for 4 years. We did a lot of riding on those carriage roads. And it's one of the great experiences anywhere in the world to be able to now connect that directly into the communities, and that the heart of town, whether it's here in Woodstock or it's New Paltz, Kingston, that the centers of town start to mirror what we just saw in that Dutch video, that the complete streets start to connect together, that the ideas of better access to housing and better access to mobility and climate change all start to come together, that equity equation that we're trying to work out has to deal with making the world a better place for everyone, right? So I'm going to start off at this point by giving away a gift. I wrote a book a few years ago, so there's a free copy. To the person who can tell me, in the new transportation bill that our United States Congress has passed and is being implemented right now, which has $8.5 billion in it for electric vehicle charging, how much of that $8.5 billion is going to charging bikes, scooters, and other vehicles that are smaller than a car? Thank you. Here's your book. The answer, correct, I'm going to throw this. You want to catch? The correct answer is $0. $8.5 billion investment in electric vehicle charging, and none of it being spent on bikes, scooters, wheelchairs, golf carts, the little vehicles the woman was talking about in the Daily Show video. Zero. Okay. Same question in New York State, the Volkswagen settlement for those diesel cars that didn't quite have the gas mileage they were supposed to have. $750 million spent by New York State out of that diesel car settlement on electric car charging. How much spent on bikes, scooters, and other devices? Yeah, see, if I had another set of books, I'd give them all away right now. This is the inequity that we're facing right now. And it's a real serious problem, because we are making it possible. Yet again, we're going to miss another trend. Active mobility, alternative transportation. We've missed so many of these big investments, and we're missing the electrification right now. Because what's happening is we're funding the thing that we already have. That thing that we already have requires a house and a driveway. Because if you don't have either of those, you can't drive a plug-in car, okay? And that is a very serious problem. That we're going to provide access to mobility to lots of people who have houses and driveways, which means we're going to create more suburban sprawl. We're going to add to the problem that we're already creating while we're trying to solve climate change. We can no longer continue to do that. It's up to those of us here in this room to make that change possible. And it isn't going to be easy, right? We're constantly fighting. We're the salmon trying to go upstream, and they built another dam in our way, right? It is really difficult to understand that without getting those obstacles out of our way, we have no chance of solving the kinds of problems the world faces right now. One of the many things I get to do in this realm is I'm an advisor to the World Resources Institute, a great organization if you're not involved with work all over the world. And we are constantly dealing with issues at this scale at a global level. And every day, you don't have to go any farther than really any source of media to realize how bad this problem is. And yet we're not reacting with enough strength, with enough force, with enough scale, with enough speed, any of the things that we need to do. And we get caught in such small issues that really aren't going to make that much of a difference, right? We need to keep seeing that big picture, but also taking that action locally. I had it happen to me last week. I went to go take care of my elderly parents in Florida and got on what I thought was a fairly simple flight to Fort Lauderdale. Anybody here know what happened in Fort Lauderdale last Wednesday? How much water, how much rainwater in 24 hours? 2 feet of rain in Fort Lauderdale. Wish I had another book. How many news articles in South Florida, starting on Wednesday night when it happened until Sunday, so 4 days later, how many news articles mentioned climate change? 0. The answer keeps coming back to 0. Yeah. There was no gasoline. That was the crisis, right? All of a sudden we didn't have, because of the floods, we didn't have any gasoline available. But the real problem was that nobody acknowledged why that problem happened. Gulf of Mexico, 3 degrees warmer than it's ever been, wind coming from that direction, cold front in the north. All of a sudden you've got the equivalent of a major hurricane happening in a 20-mile area for 24 hours. 26.5 inches of rain at the Fort Lauderdale airport. And yet most people don't even know that that happened. It's out of the news cycle. It's not even reported as a climate change story. This is all happening in real time. The situation is urgent. I don't know what I can say. Hopefully we're in a friendly room here, and everybody already believes that. But the real question is, okay, now what are we going to do? How do we make that change happen? The plan that you see here and the more modern version of it, if we want to get to the one with the 4 corridors on it to show it more clearly, this is one of the many things, but something that's so useful because it applies to everyone. This is democratic, it's egalitarian. The greenways and trails system becomes the connectivity of all of our communities. They are free and open to the public. There are no restrictions really on who can use them. And if we can really connect them into the centers of towns and make those town centers meaningful and have complete streets that are not just, we've got sidewalks and bike lanes, but streets that have trees, that have a landscape that allows people to enjoy being out in public and use that public space in the way that the Dutch did. And I want you to go back to that video in your minds just a few minutes and think about the level of activism that it took to change that. How many people have been to the Netherlands? Okay. Right now in the Netherlands, if you went to Amsterdam tonight, and by the way, we could talk about Denmark, but we could probably talk about many other cities in the world, Bogota, great example, that are making this change happen. Addis, Ethiopia, just instituted a policy where they actually counted, through World Resources Institute's efforts, they counted a census, a true census of how people move in Addis. They found that 52% of the people are walking. They started spending 52% of their money on pedestrians. Instant change, right? Imagine if we did that here. Dennis, how much money is the Transportation Council? Yeah, there's a lot of money, right? If we spent that by the percentage that we wish we could move by, there's a great policy decision that could be made. Let's look at what percentage of people walk and bike. What percentage do we want that to be? What percentage are we spending money on now? What's it going to cost to get us there, right? Those are the kinds of changes that we can see happen and that are really important for us to make happen. I think that when it comes to those actions, though, people feel helpless. And people feel that you look at climate change problems and 2 feet of rain in 24 hours and the ice caps are melting, and what can we actually do? And the thing I want everyone here tonight to think about is exactly that question. What is the action that I can take, that we can take? What are the partnerships that we can put together that will help transform the way we're doing things now? It could be policy. It could be getting involved in something as planting street trees. It could be getting involved in one of the many committees that are actually working to try and make these efforts happen. It could be advocacy at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level. That help is needed in every possible way. What's needed is another generation. Kristen, we were just talking about this on the way in. There needs to be a new generation of leadership who understands that the effort that got us to this point is partial at best. In that Netherlands example I was just using, when you look at the change that they went through and the years that it took, the parents fighting because their kids are getting killed in the streets, right? That was the campaign that made that change. It was parents talking about the safety of children. Anybody know what the percentage of trips by, and I'm going to use bikes, but I could be talking about pedestrians as well. In Amsterdam, maybe not, it's a little late at night, but it is Amsterdam. What is the percentage of people traveling by bike in Amsterdam? Typical day. Anybody guess? It's about, they're fighting to get to 50. They're in the 40s now. Copenhagen claims they're already there. These other cities are trying to do that. That's up from next to zero just decades ago, within my lifetime. It was very close. It had gone up, obviously, after World War II. They rebuilt their entire infrastructure based on the car. The numbers drop off almost to zero. And they've come back to 1 out of every 2 trips. Okay? If you counted walking in that in public transportation, you end up with the vast majority of travel taking place in major global-scale, modern, high-tech, advanced societies. Who knows what the Dutch, in terms of global health, what is their ranking in the world? Number 1. Okay, the healthiest people on the planet. Their soccer team still can't win the World Cup, but that's another problem. Yeah, you know, you keep trying. But the idea that you could integrate public health, mobility, access, think about housing, which I know is a big issue locally, that every family that owns 1 less car has that much more resource to spend on housing, on food, on healthcare. These things all are directly interconnected. And what it's going to take is some kinds of partnerships that don't exist yet. I will throw out a few suggestions maybe tonight to see if some people get excited. This is certainly a community with a tremendous depth of music and art, and I would love to see a concert or an art show take place or both that would help make more of this happen. Wouldn't that be a fun thing to do? Play to our strengths and to be able to do the kinds of things that we can do here that other communities can't. The bones of the infrastructure are there. Dennis, I think, very good description of why that landscape is there. OSI, thanks to incredible effort over years to make those pieces start to be available. What's needed right now is a full court press. I know there's probably some Knicks fans in the room. This has to be, we have no time to waste. We are going to get this done now. We're going to get it done fast. We're going to get it done well. Because if we don't, I don't really want to know what the other possibilities are, because they're not good, right? We're going to deal with a world that is completely unprepared when we talk about resiliency, when we talk about the ability to withstand the changes that are going to happen. We are likely here in upstate New York to see people coming here as climate refugees. I think it's already happening to some extent. We have the resources that we need in the next generation, including living above sea level, kind of a big bonus right there. And I don't mean this jokingly. These are really serious, serious things. We have the ability to grow food. We have the ability to grow fuel. We have the ability to have wind and sun. We have a tremendous set of resources here that at some point, water, I just run down the list, other people are going to want. And what we need to be able to do is to plan ahead and find ways that we can use those resources as efficiently and as effectively as possible and make the quality of life as high as we possibly can. That's our ace in the hole as we go forward. I would prefer not to spend my time being negative. I am absolutely, I'm an optimist. The glass is half full with an IPA in it. And that's pretty good. You know, I'm happy to keep it that way. But when I think about this next generation, my 3 kids, this is very personal as I think about that. What are we going to leave behind for them? And somebody mentioned, I think mentioned Olmsted earlier, right? Those of you who know the Olmsteds who did 400 major parks in the United States alone, Central Park and Prospect in New York City, Congress Park where I live in Saratoga. Imagine that that's the thing that 100 years from now, I was in Central Park the other day, you can't imagine, I mean, as architects and landscape architects, we're trained to visualize things that don't exist and then make them happen. That's a really fun experience, right? That Olmsted himself could never have seen what he created, had no way to visualize it except maybe renderings, that all the trees that are in Central Park and Prospect Park were grown from seedlings and cuttings in greenhouses that they built and planted for an era 100 years in the future. And riding an electric CitiBike in Central Park the other day was the way that I got to experience that. And everything is in bloom. It's the closest they would have had to video or to the simulation technologies that we have right now. He would have never seen that. Died generations went after him. That's our task right now. Whether it's the indigenous people's belief in the seventh generation, however you choose to want to frame that, we need to be thinking that far ahead, but acting right now to make it happen. So here's a handful of things that maybe we could do. We were talking earlier today, Kevin and I, about there's all this federal money out there, and there's quite a bit of it, maybe not for everything that we wish it was, but one of the things that is needed is local matching funds to be able to access that federal money. So what if Ulster County put together a fund now for projects that are going to happen over this next decade and started teeing up all the work is in here as that federal aid comes along? You don't have to go municipality by municipality or project by project to find those matching funds. So there's one, right? That's totally doable. Places like Jackson, Wyoming, or Mammoth, California, or others that I've worked with have set up exactly those kinds of funds. And they're going to do very well going after that kind of money. Second, and I appreciate there are at least a couple folks here that appear to be part of that next generation. So thank you for being here. That is an effort that needs to happen in meetings like this. And those of you that are watching out there on video, find other people who want to get involved. If there's one thing that any of us tonight can do, how many people know one other person who should have been here or could have been here? Okay, you gotta get them involved somehow. How many people think they know 10 people who could get involved? Okay, if you know 10 people that can get involved, we can change everything in this entire region, right? Because it doesn't necessarily take everyone, but creating that next generation of leadership is absolutely critical right now, because I'll be honest, we're not going to make it. It's not going to happen in our time as much as I wish that it would, and I will work till the last minute to be able to try and get that to happen. But it's just not going to happen that fast. It's going to take time. And at the same time that the problem's getting worse, the need and demand grows bigger. So it takes another generation to be able to be part of that. Third thing, and I hinted at it before, and this is just because I enjoy stuff like this, make it fun. Find a way. These are difficult issues. We're going to deal with everything from racism to classism to just run across the issues that exist in our society. We need to find a way within our communities to make change something that people enjoy, and to find a way that this does not feel like the sky is falling, as much as we can talk about the fact that it probably is. We need to find a way that people engage, that they feel comfortable, that they enjoy, that's on their own terms. So I'm going to be in favor of having that concert, as soon as we possibly can. Let's get some of the great local musicians to be part of this and create the kinds of things that create community around what we're trying to do. One of my friends and mentors had always said, don't build a trail into a community until you build a community into the trail. And I think that's what makes this so great. And the last thing I want to say tonight is everyone here. I have been so fortunate to get to work on projects like this. And if you have questions you want to ask about some of them, I'm happy to answer. It's the people who get involved. And that is just one of the great joys in life, to be able to work on stuff as difficult as it is. There's nothing better than somebody saying a project is impossible, right? And whether it's been the walkway of the Hudson, over the Hudson, or the Empire State Trail, or you name it, we can all tell our stories about projects that people said, never, not a chance, is not going to happen, can't possibly be done. And here they are. And they're setting the stage for the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And again, that should be fun for all of us. So the people that get involved make all the difference. The teams of people that work make it even better. The partnerships that grow that and beyond can really change the world. And I think that's really the reason why we're here tonight. Those of you who are on video and those of you here in person, is you believe in making that change happen. So whether it's through the Land Conservancy, whether it's through Ulster County, OSI, local organizations, all I can ask you to do, with what time, money, effort, knowledge, skills, whatever you've got, if you can get involved in making this change happen, you're going to feel as happy as I am. Thank you. I'm going to cue up that last video. Mike. Yeah, okay. We do have another video. This is a project at my, I can now say former firm. Boy, that's interesting. My partners worked on a project and since music was the theme, I thought Coachella, that's the right week. This is the CV Link, the Coachella Valley project that is designed for solar power, electric charging of small-scale vehicles, walking and bicycling, and is now linking the entire valley. They've put, I can't remember how many hundreds of millions of dollars into this effort. It went from nothing to there it is, and you can go out there and check it out. The reason I picked this one, aside from its similarities to where we are, is that, again, it's that question of what's possible. And to not stand down when someone says that can't be done. The people that made this project were all literally being laughed at, no different than launching CitiBike and getting laughed at, or wanting to build a greenway along the rim of the Grand Canyon, or any of the other projects I've worked on. I think every major project I've ever worked on, there were people who thought, that's ridiculous, not gonna happen, not worth the investment, terrible idea, get on the list, right? And then it gets done. There's 3 stages of every great project. There's total opposition, there's grudging acceptance by the opposition, then the opposition claimed it was their idea in the first place. This is one of those.
So I think we have made it to Q&A. How are we doing, guys? Okay? Okay, so with that, where is Kirk? Here. Kirk has handheld mic. If you have a question, he will bring it over and allow you to ask your question. And likewise, for you who are online, you can put questions in the chat, and they will get conveyed to us up at the podium and relayed.
Want to grab a couple chairs so we can sit the panelists up in front? And we have our first question here. We're going to set up. Look at all that. Okay. Great.
All the cameras that work? Can folks see us where we're sitting?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay,
on the screen.
Right.
So we have our first question here. You want to stand up?
Hi, everyone. My name is Rose Quinn. I'm a Kingston resident. I sit on the Ulster County Traffic Safety Board. I'm a transportation equity advocate. I met you, Jeff, actually at the hearings for the Complete Street expansion. Andy Bicking, who was speaking at that hearing, was speaking about my partner, John Lynch, who was killed leaving the O&W Trail on Washington Avenue. So I don't mean to be the person who is, bringing everyone down, because that's not my intention, because actually I love trails. I really love trails. I really am a huge fan, and I really want to see trail expansion everywhere. But what I also know that we have to make it work is we have to have safe streets. We have to have a safe system for people to be able to access the trail networks to begin with. And right now in Ulster County, unfortunately, we've experienced an unprecedented amount of loss. We lost 4 people in Kingston within 2 years. We hadn't lost anybody in close to a decade, I think. And I do know this because I actually administered a grant for the for the governor's traffic safety committee. So it was my job to keep tabs on that. So my question is, in terms of trails, how does this all work in with the safe systems approach? So the federal government has said that we should be adhering to the safe systems approach. We really should be dropping the E's and all that other stuff. We have to have an integrated approach. So what are the opinions really of everybody up here? I mean, do we know about the safe systems approach, and how are we integrating that into our trail systems? So thank you very much.
Your question.
Yeah, I guess I'll start. First of all, it takes some real bravery to do what you do, and thanks for that. It's those of us that spend a lot of time in this world working on these issues all know someone, and it's the hardest thing. When I worked for New York State, every single day I got a notice like that on my desk. I worked there for 5 years. It happened every day. There's no right answer for that in any meaningful way, but at least from a professional perspective, there are a number of things that many of us have spent decades trying to do. The hard part is, again, getting agencies and leadership and entrenched bureaucracies that have always done things the way they do to change that approach and to be part of that solution instead of part of the problem. There are design guidelines now that have been developed in collaboration with some of the best people all over the world that are readily available, that often aren't being used. That should be part of every single project. We have complete streets policies, but we still see projects getting built that aren't doing the right thing. We see professionals out there who still, even though they have professional licenses, don't necessarily know how to design these things the way that they need to be. And I completely agree with the comment, which has been said earlier, that just the trails by themselves is only one small bit of that infrastructure. In fact, I'll take a chapter from my own book. There's 4 layers of infrastructure that have to be in place for a community to be whole. Trails are just the base layer, followed by streets for cyclists, streets for pedestrians, intersections and connections with transit. All of that has to be there. Otherwise, we really just are building bits and pieces and not a systems approach to solving the problem. So how do we get there becomes the question. And it takes constant force and advocacy at levels that maybe we haven't quite seen yet. Certainly the alliance that you've been part of and testifying to our legislature is a huge step in the right direction. But that voice, unfortunately, is going to have to get raised a lot louder than it has been before. And we are seeing the numbers in this post-pandemic, assuming we're post-pandemic, by the way, I hope we are, world where motorists are speeding more, completely ignoring signals. There's no law enforcement dealing with that in any direct way in many cases. I was hit myself in the last 6 months by a motorist who was just, I think, racing from a traffic signal to a stop sign a block away, and was, I think, trying to see how close they could come to me, and hit me with the passenger side mirror of a large pickup truck. Next time you look at a pickup truck, I want you to think about how wide that space is that I got hit by the mirror and not the rest of the truck. Inches, absolute fractions, right? That's happening all the time. So I wish there was this isn't question and answer in this case. There's no answer. Anybody else want to even try to do it?
I think that's a really good, I think that's a really good rundown. What I would say is that from the Transportation Council standpoint, we certainly understand and are working towards a safe systems approach. It's been in our long-range transportation plan to look at it. Sometimes we're looking at this at a policy level, and sometimes you're looking at it as a project level. And it's not just about an individual action. It's also about how all that action ties together. Whether it is how you access the roadway, but also how you access the businesses off the roadway. And those are things that we try to make sure that we do those things over time as new construction takes place. That you make sure that the connection from the sidewalk to the business is not through a parking lot. You're trying to make sure that it actually is a meaningful connection. And you're also trying to make sure that as you're looking at corridors that were designed in the 70s, that you can find a way that you can find the space so that you can put the necessary infrastructure in over time.
We have a
And
question online.
sometimes that is, as individual projects come back in for approvals, you add those requirements back into the approvals. But one of the things you don't do is let anything move forward until you have a good sense of what that means. Part of that has to do with education, not just in terms of the individuals or the professionals, but it's also of local planning boards and those people that are involved in the decision-making process, so that when you understand when you're doing site plan review and it talks about access, that you're not just talking about vehicle access, you're talking about other types of access as well.
Thank you, Dennis. We have a question here for this gentleman, and we have another question here, but we're going to try to alternate and bring in questions from the digital world as well, from Zoom. So is there a question on Zoom that we can have?
It's just Jeff, could you please share the name of the book?
Oh, we got a copy of it in the back there.
Copy of it?
The book was called The Third Mode, and if you want to just Google or use Amazon, just search for The Third Mode, my name, it's available.
Great. Okay, question here.
Daniel Meter. I'm a resident of New Paltz. I'm on the New Paltz Bike and Pedestrian Committee, as are some members watching on Zoom. Also, our committee meeting is tonight, and our meeting is participating in this.
Thank you.
I'm impressed by two things: that map, and also the Kingston recently published its bike pedestrian plan, which is really impressive. I'm not expert enough to know how good it is, but I'm impressed by it. If we as a group of citizens in New Paltz Township and Village want to help contribute and begin working on such a plan for not just the rail trails, but for a whole network of pedestrian access, bicycle access through the town and village of New Paltz, that we can just not recreation, but go see our grandchildren, go shopping, go to school, etc. Kids even go to school. How do we begin that process? Who can help us develop the plan, develop the map, develop the procedures? Who can help us develop the community support, the opposition support, the opposition taking credit for it, whatever? Is there a process help available for us as citizens, just volunteering our time to develop such a plan, such a network?
Thank you. You guys can talk about it.
Sure. One of the things I would say is that I started my conversation with you earlier by basically saying your passion drives policy, which drives plans, which drives projects. So the thought I would have to you is that in some instances, it's not about the process. It's not about, it's literally about expressing the need and the passion for that and explaining that to the elected officials. And from there, people can find a way to do things and to get things done. I would say this with respect to New Paltz now, the Transportation Council has program funding for complete streets work in the activity centers in the county, including those with respect to the village and area in and around New Paltz. Not the whole town, but certainly within the activity centers. And that's in our planning program for this year, although I think it's going to be late in the year by the time we get to it.
Thank you, Dennis. Before we get to this young man here for his question, I just want to point out a couple local people, hyper-local people. Laura Ricci, she's the town board member, and she's also the liaison for the Complete Streets Committee. And then also Grace Murphy. We have, she's the chair of the Complete Streets, so some local action people, and take some notes about getting things done.
Hi, my name's Liam. I'm a student at Ontario, and I just had a question on what have you done to engage the youth and students in your work and make it accessible to schools?
Thank you for that.
I think that was directed at me. Well, I think I realized pretty early on that most of what I was working on was going to take longer than I had the ability to do. And I started teaching at the State University of New York in Albany in the graduate planning school. Something that I thought I was doing a single guest lecture and ended up doing for 21 years. There are more than 1,000 students who went through those classes who are now professionals and are running a lot of the organizations and projects, and they work at places like OSI, and they've worked for Ulster County and communities all over the world. I think that was probably one of the more tactical ways that I had of trying to reach a audience that up until that time, there was no one teaching a class like that anywhere. literally no one, which is kind of depressing when you think about it. Like, this should have been taught at universities all over the place. It did lead to an effort nationally and a national curriculum that was developed, and now that course has been replicated in dozens of places, and there are university students working on that. There are a number of places that have taken that work and brought it down into school level, and there are programs like Future Cities that myself and other colleagues have been involved in to constantly find ways to get folks like yourself to ask that question. Every public meeting projects I've ever worked on, we always had a kids table. We always made sure that there was a chance for that voice to be here. And I'm just so happy that you're here and you asked a question. Keep asking those questions, challenge. This is Woodstock. We should talk about challenging authority, you know? Don't trust anybody over 30. I think we can say that now, right? And I mean that with all seriousness, that it is, I'm gonna say this, it's your generation has the chance that maybe we set the stage, but it's this next 25 years that's gonna make the difference. So if I can help personally in any way, help you do that, let me know. Thanks.
I would just like to say, for anybody who's interested, Liam penned an amazing article for the Onteora High School Talon, the newspaper for the Onteora Central School District, and it is about the connection between the Ashokan Rail Trail in Boyceville across a new protected bike pedestrian lane on the new bridge across the Lower Esopus, and then a multi-use path that New York State DOT is putting in on one side of the highway. And our Rail Trail Committee and community members and students like Liam and his fellow students would really like to see a seamless connection across the highway that's safe for students when they're allowed. To be able to, after school, go across to the shops, or the cross-country running team to be able to use the safe crosswalk and go down and do their conditioning on the Ashokan Rail Trail. Those kinds of things, science classes, ecology classes, whatever that is. So Onteora Talon, front page article, it's fantastic, and I learned a lot. Thank you, Liam.
Thanks, Kevin. We have time for a couple more questions before we have one online. Okay, and we're going to go to that one now. I feel like we have another one. Oh, we finally have a question from that side. We were beating you over here. So good. Question online?
Okay, this is from Judy Kerman. I live about 2 miles from Woodstock, from the Woodstock Dyke trailhead of the rail trail. I have an electric trike. I can't use the rail trail because I can't get my trike into my car, and I can't ride it across Route 28 to the railhead. What can Woodstock do to connect the town or any part of it to the rail trail?
That was a great question. I think we planted that question. So, so this is how can we connect Woodstock to the rail trail? That's the question, right?
So we had a lot of that discussion when we did the design for the rail trail in terms of trying to figure out how to get across 28. And it's a difficult crossing. You're literally trying to put a crosswalk on a 4-lane highway, which will create all kinds of issues with respect to those jurisdictions that own the highway. The thought being is that you try to find a way that you can get down to the signal and then use the signal as a way across with a crosswalk on that, and then start to look at that infrastructure in there to make that crossing. Getting down 375 out of Woodstock down to the trail is another challenge, but those are things that you should look at. We will look at over time. I just want to go back to Liam's, if I may. Liam, we're more than willing to come out and speak to your school from the Transportation Council. If you want to send that invitation out, we'll be more than willing to come out and speak to the school.
Perfect.
Thank you, Dennis.
Okay, a couple more questions. And there was a question that how can we get more Liams in the room, right? That was what's it. So we have to work on that one. Maybe you may not have an answer for that right now, but think about it. Your question.
Yeah. Hi, mine is kind of a related question. I'm Deborah Lax. I'm a COVID refugee, new to the area, so relatively new. But I found like in New York City, there was a bike map of the 5 boroughs. It showed which roads to go on, you know, which are safer roads, not so safe roads. I've done less biking up here than I've done since 2001. in New York City and less walking. Like we're a mile from Woodstock. We're on 375. We tried to walk it once with yellow vests, you know, construction worker vests. We thought we were going to die. And it's a mile. In Brooklyn, a mile would be nothing. So it's like, you know, 28 to 212 is like a death zone. And I've gone on 375 down to the rail trail. It is scary. It's very, very scary. So I feel like, you know, we're kind of like landlocked here or something. It's like you can't walk. It's I don't know if that's a question. Can you help us?
It's a cry for help here. Yes.
It's a cry for help.
Jeff, could you take a shot at?
Yeah, sure.
You know,
First of all, those are the kinds of things that people need to hear. And you need to raise your voice and say that, because decision makers won't change the way things are done. An agency that's got a road that they won't design for people to cross should be completely unacceptable. What agency is that? Right? That's part of the purpose of that road, is to get people to where they're going, no matter how they get there. There are a number of things, though, that almost any community can do without necessarily building anything major. Speed limits can be modified, for one. There's an easy one, right? New York City, well, it's not easy, but it could be, right? There is a better way to do that, and this country is finally starting to adapt to that. Our state legislature is finally starting to enable that. It's taken a long time to get those changes to happen, but you know, New York City went to a 25-mile-an-hour citywide speed limit, and it was one of the single biggest things that improved traffic safety in general. Beginning to think about some creative and interesting ways to restripe the road without rebuilding it. And there are all kinds of designs that are out there, which maybe state DOT isn't quite ready to use yet, but certainly are being used in other parts of the country. And there's some really great examples of ways in which those problems. The one thing to recognize is the problem you're trying to solve, you're not the only one. Somebody out there somewhere has dealt with a very similar situation. The key is to be able to figure out what that is, learn from that example, and try to make it happen. But I do think that if the roads continue to be designed the way they are, with the speeds the way they are, people driving the way they are, which is often not paying attention to the road by any means, until we get to fully automated vehicles, which is another subject for a different evening, I don't think we have a way to make it a whole lot safer. So it's got to be raising your voice, demanding that change, and making sure that it happens in a way that doesn't take 20 years. So we can get to more stuff. That's right. And that's why it needs to change right now.
The other thing that's available to us is rumble strips along shoulders.
Example.
Those are really good examples that work. But the real difficulty is that the consistency of shoulders is really difficult in a lot of areas, mainly because of different right-of-way issues, et cetera. But working towards that, and I think Jeff is right. The point being is that when we start to look at where the connections are needed, then we start to find solutions that are a lot better. And the other example I would give you is that when we go and look at activity centers, those crosswalks and activity centers, which are literally, if you cross here, if you need to go there, you have to cross here and then cross there, instead of basically being able to walk across the intersection in the way that would normally get you there in a much faster fashion. Those are things that we've been pushing in a number of instances. New Paltz is one, and we've also had some conversations with respect to Uptown Kingston, the ability to put those kinds of basically scrambled crosswalks in, so that you can cross where to destinations rather than following the white line.
And bear in mind, you do have that legal right. When you look up the definition of the word traffic in vehicle and traffic law in New York State, you may know what the first word is in the definition of traffic? Pedestrians. Okay. Second word, bicyclists. Okay. So we have, anytime somebody's doing a traffic study or a traffic safety project or a traffic improvement, by law, that right exists in the state for it to accommodate pedestrians and bicyclists as of right. Doesn't happen all the time, but next time you need to, take out section 1231 of the vehicle and traffic law.
Yeah,
Thanks, Jeff.
I would just like to jump on this for 1 second, because Woodstock now has, with the support of the town board, thank you, Laura, a Complete Streets Committee.
That's right.
And because of the hard work, and there's several people, if you're on that committee, could you raise your hand?
Yeah, give your hand raised to see the Complete Streets members here. Thank you for.
These folks have worked really hard.
Thank you for your work.
Under the chairmanship of Grace Murphy. And Woodstock now has officially a complete streets policy for the first time. And Grace, I wonder if I could put you on the spot to just talk about the Tinker Street project for just 1 minute as a way to get people in, invite people to get involved, to raise their voices, as Jeff says.
So the sidewalks on Tinker Street in the village of Woodstock are being under a renovation project from the DOT. And we've been working with the DOT to make sure that those renovations don't preclude complete streets accommodations. And it's not that easy, quite honestly, because they have ideas that the sidewalks should be what they always were, rather than what we need them to be. So when you talk about ask and make sure that you make your voice heard, what you just said was really, really important. We are also thinking about not just the Tinker Street renovation, but connectivity. Connectivity to the rail trail, connectivity to Kingston eventually, connectivity to Bearsville, where the new library is going to be. So anybody who wants to join us in supporting these, we have a mailing list, we have a newsletter that comes out monthly. And we really want, we'll get it, yeah.
I should also mention that we will be sending out a resource sheet so that there'll be links on there for all kinds of resources if people want to get involved.
I believe we're going to have to. Thank you, Grace. Thank you. We're going to have to draw this event to a close. I think that one thing we can rely upon is Complete Streets to do some research and help us develop the advocacy that's necessary in our region to really start to develop some local some really local situations. So in case you didn't hear what Grace said, that there is a petition to sign that is striving to lower the speed limit throughout the village of Woodstock, across all the major routes that go through the Woodstock. So that campaign should be, everybody should be signing that. So okay, we have a complete street sign up. We're flexible. Great, thank you, Caroline. So, Kevin, you want to take a moment? I want to just appreciate everyone that was here this evening. I want to close out by saying thank you for attending all of the events of our series this year. We had a wonderful time putting them on, and we've reached the end of our series. This is our fourth and final. But now, Jeff, please thank our wonderful guests this evening. Jeff and Dennis and Peter, just thank you so much for your time and for bringing what you do, your life's work here. It's great. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you all. And thank you online.